Are you in control? There's obviously a lot of data out there, a lot of wearables you can wear, whether it's a Motus Global throw, where you can check your arm, whether it's quarterback, where a quarterback can check his stats, whether you're using the new Motus One that tells you all sorts of things about your readiness. All of that is data you can control. But it's more than that. You can put on an Apple Watch and understand some of your fitness levels, Fitbit, all the others that are out there, or even a Whoop strap, which we'll talk about. But are you in control of your data? Look, we're not all scientists. We're not all, biomechanists. We're not all performance coaches or athletic trainers. But as an athlete, you better figure out enough to be able to be in control of your destiny. One of the things I hear a lot of times from agents or teams is that teams are going to use this kind of data against me. Well, you know what? The flip side is absolutely true. If you're an athlete and you have good recovery, good resilience, low stress, you can use that against the team. Or, oddly enough, you could work together and try to get a good result. But if you're not in control of your data, who is? This is the Motus Show. Hi, I'm Will Carroll. You know me. And Joel Hennert's back in the studio putting this all together. Today we're going to talk with Kristen Holmes-Winn. She is a vice president for performance optimization at Whoop. That's Whoop, W-H-O-O-P. If you don't know what a Whoop strap is or the Whoop system, we're going to explain a little bit more. And I want to jump right into this because I think this is one of the more interesting areas of performance optimization, performance modeling. Whoop has a wearable that it goes on the wrist. It looks like sort of like a wristwatch without a display, but it tracks heart rate, it tracks sleep, it tracks some really interesting variables that then come out and give a measure of readiness. And there are a lot of teams using this. There have been situations, I know last year in the NBA. The NBA does not allow wearables. You can't use them in-game. Obviously, a lot of teams are using them in practice and off the court. One of the players, Matthew Dellavedova, forgot and wore his Whoop strap onto the court and incurred a fairly hefty fine for it. But I know there are teams out there. Cleveland was one of the first teams that used it. But it works for more than just elite athletes. The first time I encountered a Whoop strap was in the world of endurance racing. Not just marathons, but there are these races where these guys go like 100 miles or run through the desert. If you haven't read Chris McDougall's book, Born to Run, about an Indian tribe in Mexico that runs amazingly long distances just for the heck of it, it seems like. And that led them to trying some of these runners in these long endurance races. People are using the Whoop strap and a couple other biological wearables where it's obviously huge. If you think about, say, an Ironman, if you think about an ultra marathon, or even just a marathon with, say, the Sub-2 project, knowing these kind of variables for readiness and recovery are absolutely huge. And I think readiness and recovery, the management and the measurement, are going to be absolutely the key, especially in baseball. Now, I've got an article up at motusglobal.com. You can check out my Twitter feed for the link to that. I won't try to give you a URL over a podcast. That just doesn't work. But I really think we're at a dawning of an age of readiness and recovery. Whoever figures this out first, whoever manages this process the best, is going to have a very quick advantage. I think this is going to be a lot like the analytics revolution in baseball, where there were some teams that got a early advantage, and then over the course of about a decade, it kind of evened out. There are no teams that have a huge analytic advantage. Where it comes from is in personnel and usage and who's listening. Same sort of thing here. If you have a Motus Throw or a Motus One and a Whoop and a Rapsodo or any of the other variables out there, it could be something as simple as an Apple Watch. It's going to come down to what you value and what you're trying to measure and how accurately. All these things are going to come together. Readiness and recovery are going to be huge. And Whoop is one of the people at the start. And Kristen Holmes-Winn, again, the vice president of performance optimization. She's got a huge background. She was the field hockey coach at Princeton, one of the top teams, a national champion back in 2012. She was with the United States Field Hockey Association as one of their top players and coaches for over 25 years. Absolutely knows her high performance athletes, even though field hockey is not one that you think of automatically. Kristen really knows her stuff. And my chance to talk with her this week, I learned a lot. I think you will too. Here's that conversation. Kristen, I think the first thing that we need to explain to people is what the heck is a Whoop? And when we say that, I have to say, where the heck did the name come from?
Yeah, so our founder, Will Ahmed, he played squash at Harvard, and it was just part of their locker room lingo. They're going to whoop it up today kind of thing, and it just kind of stuck with him, and that's how he got the name for the device.
Great stuff. Now, tell us what a Whoop is. It's obviously, there are tons of wearable devices out there. There are tons of great ones. So what does a Whoop do? What makes it different?
So, at our core, we're really a data and analytics company. So I think what makes us special is we have these robust algorithms that are, constantly learning from the person. So, by this wrist-worn data collection method, we're able to, tell if an individual, almost down to the minute, how much sleep they need to optimally regenerate. We can tell a person how much strain they put on their body during the workout, as well as over the course of an entire day. We can tell, an individual's capacity for effort, which, how primed they are to adapt to their environment. We label this recovery. So we really, we provide insight around sleep, strain, and recovery that, that we believe help athletes and coaches, make better decisions, from a coach's vantage point, better decisions on, kind of who plays, how much they play, how ready is the athlete to give on any particular day. And for the athletes, just really, learning about their body.
Let's talk about what strain is. I feel like this is a definitions class right now, but what do you mean by strain?
Yeah, so in our world, it's really a summary statistic of cardiovascular load. So how hard the heart is working, and we measure this on a scale of 0 to 21. And, so the more time you're spending in the upper limits of your heart rate zone, the more strain you will end up, putting on your body.
So it's very literally a workload measurement.
Yeah, exactly. And we actually, the player load and strain, correlate almost perfectly in some of the studies that we've done recently. So that's kind of an exciting find for us.
So how do athletes use this? Do you find that it's more the performance coach, the athletic trainer, the strength and conditioning guy, an analytics guy, or is it the player themselves that start to really get into it and take control of managing both the workload and the recovery?
It's all of the above, so we have just I feel like a million different kind of use cases, and in some environments, it's just the medical team, who have access to the data and are thinking about it from a rehab and recovery standpoint. We have other environments that, there's everything is completely shared, and coaches have visibility in the data, medical staff, strength conditioning staff, the entire high performance team have visibility and are actioning the data daily. And then we have other environments where it's literally just the athletes, and maybe, at the professional level, their personal trainer, who has visibility in the data and they're using it maybe as an off-season tool or using it in season as well to really think about, balancing that strain and recovery.
With that strain, obviously, Whoop has been focused on the athletic market. We see it most with the NBA. I know there's some athletes in other sports that are using it. I've seen a lot of use in endurance sports like triathlons and marathons. Does this have general consumer applications? I am not an athlete. I was never a great athlete, but what would a Whoop tell me in my generally sedentary lifestyle?
Well, I think one of the most important things that just a general consumer can learn is understand their sleep. I think for the most part, people are not getting enough biological sleep, right? And I think this is I'd always go back to the elite side because that's, I deal with professional athletes and teams. That's kind of like what I do. And the NBA, for example, their average sleep is, I think it's like 5 hours and 39 minutes,
Wow.
right? So it's very, very low. So you're dealing with, at the professional level, you're dealing with, athletes who obviously have extraordinary like genetic capability. They've got this incredible, skills and expertise in their sport. But what they're really not leveraging is the performance lifestyle. And that's kind of the third factor of human performance when you think about genetics, knowledge, and the performance lifestyle. So I think, from the consumer standpoint, it's really dialing in on the lifestyle factors, the sleep, balancing strain and recovery, thinking about, okay, how do I build strain? Am I getting enough strain? I think people, undertrain,
Mm-hmm.
you might be in that category.
Yeah.
You're not actually working your heart hard enough to create these physiological improvements that are ultimately going to kind of help you live a happier, healthier lifestyle. And that's at a fundamental level, that's really what we're all after, right? Is more energy, more happiness, and the foundation of that really lies in sleep and balancing the strain and recovery.
With that,
so I think what we've done is we've kind of wrestled to the ground, I think, what's most fundamental, what's most foundational about human performance.
With that, it sounds like there's an acute chronic component underneath a lot of this.
No question, especially, when you're dealing with elite athletes, where, and that's where I think understanding the trends is really, really important. And I think we visualize those trends in a very simple way, where you can see, movement off of the athlete, standard deviation movement off the athlete's baseline. So you really get on a daily basis a very much full picture of where that athlete actually is relative to their baseline.
I know you can't talk about specific players or specific teams. It's the bane of our existence. I know these non-disclosure agreements that we can't talk about. But can you give me an example where an athlete has taken the data and made a change, whether, whatever that might be that the Whoop is telling them, and improved their performance both in the short and long term?
Yeah, I have a lot of examples. I mean, I think, we've got a lot of athletes who just stop drinking, for example, during the season, stop drinking alcohol because they see that it doesn't impact, their next day metrics. It's not just a one day hangover, but they will fail to return to their baseline up 4 to 5 days.
Wow.
After a big drinking event. Yeah. So I think when athletes, when they have visibility into this data and they can see the performance costs of these undesirable behaviors, they really do. They make changes. It's maybe they don't quit drinking entirely, but they drink differently.
Mm-hmm.
They maybe choose beer over alcohol. They maybe they'll find that, gosh, when they drink alcohol a couple hours before bedtime, it really does increase their disturbances across the night. Their resting heart when they wake up will be through the roof. Their heart rate variability will be will decrease substantially. So the way these guys grind through a season, it becomes just not worth it. So that's what we see. We see guys spending more time in bed. Right. They end up dedicating more time to sleep because they see the direct correlation between, their sleep and their recovery. They're going to be, the more they sleep, the more they're recovered, the more capacity they have, to take on strain. They'll see, when we take this data up against, performance data like, TrackMan data, for example, mm-hmm. we see a direct correlation between, Whoop recovery and exit pitch velocity, exit bat velocity. So, you start to, put these pieces together and athletes see very quickly that, wow, I'm a better athlete. I'm a better man, frankly, when I'm more recovered.
You bring up an interesting point here, Kristen. You talk about integrating, say, the Whoop data with the TrackMan data or other forms. We're in a world of wearables right now. Do you feel like integrating that data is going to be the next step for Whoop, or do you feel like essentially the performance coaches are going to become the hub, and then sometimes the athlete themselves is the performance coach?
Well, I think we need to think about the next step when we think about AI is, we have to ask the question, what are these other variables that we want to layer on top of all the possible data sets, right? And then who's going to be responsible for looking at all that? so just to give you an example, so we know, an athlete's recovery, for example, going into a game, we just kind of talked about that. What if we layer in air temperature, humidity, spin rate, pitch velocity, range of motion, you bring all of this into one ecosystem, then you have algorithms, that teach us about the correlations that are present in the data, and not doing this retrospectively, but actually getting feedback in the moment, so I think there's the AI kind of hub, like the athlete management system, and then you have a director of performance who's kind of, looking at this information and then feeding it, to example, for a coach who's, in the dugout. I look at games. I'm a huge baseball fan, and I was watching the Cleveland Yankees series really closely, and game 3, and this is where it just solidified for me. So game 3, the Yankees are obviously, behind in the series, and this is just a pivotal game for them to stay in it. And I think Andy Miller was pitching, and I could see they kept panning to Terry Francona in the dugout, and you could see. I looked at my husband. I'm like, gosh, he wants to take Miller out right now. I can just see it. He was, just really twitchy. And then literally 2 pitches later, Bird hits a bomb off of Andy Miller. But imagine just having, Francona saw signals, right?
Mm-hmm.
That made him maybe want to take Miller out. But, so just to have like some of this feedback in the moment, I mean, just imagine how it changes the game.
Well, I think, especially with heart rate, I was involved with a study with a major league team it was a minor league study, because easier to tell single A players to, hey, put this on.
For sure.
With heart rate, and watching the data in game was absolutely fascinating, because I realized, I want to see when LeBron James steps to the line. I like seeing that he's 12 for 14 at the line, but that doesn't tell me a whole lot. If his heart rate is up and he's kind of clutching, or if he's tired, or if he's really feeling the pressure, that tells me something. And you can see how TNT could pop that up on the screen very, very easily, and that the technology exists. I mean, it'd be nice for the coach to know it. I'm sure Steve Kerr would like to know the rotations. And I think we're starting to see this. Do you think that not just letting, say, Terry Francona know it, but letting Joe Buck know that somebody's heart rate is up or their arm speed is down is going to change how we watch the game?
No question. I mean, I think it's only a matter of time before, all this physiological data is on the screen. We're going to know, the offensive line's recovery. We're going to know, how much sleep Tom Brady got last night. We're going to know all these things. And I think it's a matter of, figuring out what that data, that transfer of data ownership is. And, it's just, it's a lot of players, obviously, to kind of coordinate the effort. But, we're absolutely going in that direction. There's no question.
When you take a look at the data as a broad set, and obviously you've collected a lot there with Whoop, there's a lot of your wearables out there. What one thing surprised you? What one finding do you think was counterintuitive, either to your background as an athlete or to what people generally have assumed?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I definitely, an athlete will say, or that they think they got 8 hours of sleep, but they really only got 5 hours and 40 minutes. I think just that realization that the amount I need to spend more time in bed, is really what it comes down to. And it sounds so simple, but sleep is the most important behavioral experience we have as human beings, and it's just not enough of a focus in these athletes' lives. So I think that I think is the biggest thing that an individual athlete is going to see in their own data.
Do you think teams are doing enough to emphasize this?
No.
Obviously, clearly, we're seeing that in the data. I've been tracking my sleep for years, and I know this to be absolutely true. One of the things that changed my sleep, so this is a personal thing, I'm wondering if it's universal. I began meditating about 3 years ago, and I've actually seen that my meditation, if I have to skip a day, my sleep gets worse. Providing it's tough to provide a good sleep environment, especially on the road for a team, but you can meditate almost anywhere. Have you seen anything in terms of that?
Absolutely. I will say, yes, there's a direct correlation between mindfulness, meditation, passive mindfulness, mind you, meditation, deep meditation actually activates the sympathetic nervous system, which, is not necessarily what you want to do if you're trying to reduce your heart rate, for example, and really get into kind of a restorative state. So there's different types of meditation that create a different physiological effect, but there's a direct correlation between the guys that practice mindfulness and or start mindfulness, and then we see that in their sleep efficiency. And you made the point about on the LeBron James's heart rate when he's on the foul line. The more recovered it is, the more he's going to be able to have that capacity to be present, right? I mean, and that's what the zone is really. It's just this absolute presence. So not thinking about the past, not thinking about the future, but really dialing in that moment. And, those are the guys that, you want to have the ball in their hands at the final minute of the game, last play. But that's a skill. I was just working with an NBA team yesterday, and I told them, like, guys, like, you need to think about, sleep and preparing for sleep in the same way that you practice your jump shot. Like, this is a skill. Performance really is a choice when it comes down to it. It's about, what are you willing to sacrifice? How much work are you willing to put in on making, the habits around sleep and recovery, making those things habits, not just, something that you're thinking about, a couple times a week, maybe when you're feeling run down.
With Whoop, obviously technology is changing rapidly. What's next for Whoop? What do you have in the near-term pipeline that you can tell us about?
Yeah, well, I think, definitely pulling in, some of the other variables. I would love to see us think a little bit about hydration and maybe, using the Whoop strap to sense, sweat potentially. So, we've got the kind of the hardware on top that has the sensor underneath, but actually using the band to potentially collect some information would be really interesting. We're working on a head that you would slide over top of the Whoop strap, kind of similar to how the battery functions. Just slide it over top and you'd be able to see real-time heart rate. At the moment, the Whoop strap, it doesn't have any, there's no data no data that's visible on the Whoop strap. Right. You'd have to go into your app to kind of see that. And then we also are looking into building a head a kind of a stand that would go next to your bed that would analyze your room hygiene and give you some feedback on how you can optimize the environment for sleep.
That's great stuff. I was going to ask, the strap doesn't have any sort of display. Was that a conscious decision for battery life?
It's exactly. We're always fighting battery. I think our sampling rate is 100 times a second. It's just we're pulling in so much, moving so much data across the day that you start to layer in other functionality and you lose the granularity, the accuracy, that we obviously really value, and that our high performing teams value. So
it's great stuff. If somebody wants to get their own Whoop strap or learn more, where can they go?
Well, they can go onto our website, whoop.com, and we've got an elite team solution. That's kind of my area. And then you've got the consumer side where you can just go on and just purchase on your own.
Thanks again to Kristen Holmes-Winn. She's the Vice President of Performance Optimization. That's a good title. Performance Optimization, of course, at Whoop. That's WHOOP. You can check out their website. Great stuff there. I'm really excited about the possibility of things like Whoop, where you can track more than just the basics. I mean, maybe you've had an Apple Watch, as I do, and you've tracked your heart rate. You've used other applications for sleep. I think there's a time when you have to say, if this is important to me, if this is something I really want to take control of, I've got to kind of step up my game. A Whoop strap is, I think, a couple $100. I forget the exact number. It's not cheap, but it's not out of reach. Technology always tends to come down in price, and I think more and more of these really technological, really forward-thinking performance wearables are starting to get reachable for more people. Unfortunately, not everyone. I'd love to have everyone have a Motus sleeve, a Whoop strap, a Rapsodo unit, wherever they are. It's not quite there yet, but it's getting closer. So I think we have to pick and choose. If you're getting serious enough, if you're $1 million athlete, a $500 sleeve or a $500 strap is not going to get it. $150 for a Motus throw is not going to be a big deal for you. If you're, Timmy in the Little League, who's 13 years old and just joined the travel team, what's really going to be your decision? Are you going to be able to buy all of them? That'll give you all the data? Because man, you could you give me a couple $1,000 and I'm going to get you some really cool wearable technology, and we're going to get a whole bunch of data that will probably make you a lot better. But if you have to pick and choose, that is difficult. So I think, again, this is a situation where athletes and parents and coaches and teams have to really start to take control of this. And I think we're going to have some shakeout. Some of these companies aren't going to be there. But I'm very confident that I work for one that is. When you take a look at these, again, I think one of the keys, as Kristen agreed, is going to be who can really process this data. Is it going to be a hub, or is it going to be a coach? Is it going to be machine learning or AI, or is it going to be the athlete understanding his body and being informed by the data? It's going to be very interesting, and we're going to continue to talk about that here on the Motus Show going forward. A couple great shows coming up in the very near future. We're going to have the return of Fergus Connolly next week. Fergus's book, Game Changer, absolutely epic work. I know I've touted it time and time again on here, but we're going to talk more about that. Fergus is the director of performance for the University of Michigan. He knows what he's talking about and has laid it out in a manifesto. So go out, check that out. We'll talk more about that on the next show. Want to thank Kristen Holmes-Winn and the people at Whoop. Check out their work at their website. Thanks to Joel Hennard back at headquarters for producing the show. Everybody at Motus, we will see you next week. Make sure you subscribe. Leave us a review on iTunes. It really does matter. And if you have ideas for shows, if you have questions, anything, make sure you contact us at Motus Show, or you can contact me directly at Injury Expert on Twitter. We'll see you next week when we talk to Fergus Connolly.